What's the biggest lie you've ever told? Be honest. My biggest lie is probably the name of this channel, because I haven't answered a question on here in years. Lying is something we all do. It's kind of an endemic quality that all humans seem to have. In fact, lying is so prevalent that telling the truth is often shocking to people. As Oscar Wilde once said, if you want to tell someone the truth, do it with humor, or they'll kill you. I mean, remember when Hannibal Buress did jokes about Bill Cosby being a rapist and everybody was shocked and appalled by it? And then, yeah. Of course, some lies are worse than others. You know, padding your resume is one thing, but lying to get away with killing someone, it's more frowned upon. So, you know, a device that can tell if somebody is lying sounds like a pretty great idea. Too bad lie detectors are total bullshit. The lie detector, or polygraph test, was invented by a police officer named John Larson in 1921 in Berkeley, California. And ironically, the original purpose of the polygraph wasn't to convict criminals, it was actually to keep cops honest. The head of the Berkeley Police Department was a guy named August Vollmer, and he was actually kind of a national figure at the time, leading a police reform movement. And he saw lie detectors as a more scientific approach to interrogation that would help prevent abuses of power by cops. At the time, the third degree was a tactic that was prevalent amongst police officers, which involved basically intimidating suspects into confessing, or sometimes just outright physical violence. Luckily, cops have gotten a lot less violent since then. Comment section overload. Comment section overload. The polygraph was based on the systolic blood pressure test that had just been invented by William Moulton Marston, who actually went on later to become a comic book writer for Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, who famously had a weapon called the Lasso of Truth. Connections! The idea behind the polygraph is that when you lie, it creates sort of a subconscious incongruence that shows up in the physiology of your body. Things like systolic heartbeat, breathing rate, perspiration rate, and blood pressure. So instead of beating a confession out of people, their bodies can do the confessing for them. Pretty great idea, except it's a terrible idea. Because as it turns out, if you're being interrogated for a crime that could put you in jail for the rest of your life or give you the death penalty, whether you did that crime or not, you're gonna be a little nervous about it. And those heightened emotions are just straight up gonna throw everything out of whack. There's just no way around it. And polygraph tests were challenged in court almost immediately, leading to the Supreme Court case of Frye versus the United States in 1923, where they kind of punted by saying this: scientific evidence, like that obtained through the polygraph, should only be admissible if it was sufficiently established to have gained general acceptance in the scientific community. And in the case of the polygraph, that scientific acceptance never quite came. Although it did have its supporters over the years, like Leonard Keeler, who established the first forensics lab in 1930, which kind of became the model that the FBI was based off of later on. So this lent some legitimacy to it in the criminal justice community that was never quite matched by the acceptance in the scientific community. But the tide really turned in 2003 when Gary Ridgway confessed to being the Green River Killer who killed 49 people in the 80s and 90s. He was actually brought in as a suspect way back in 1987, and he was given a polygraph test then, which he passed with flying colors. The police felt like this exonerated him, so he shook their hands, walked out the front door, and went on to kill another dozen or so people. And as if that wasn't bad enough, another man named Melvin Foster actually failed a lie detector test in 1982 and made national headlines as a possible suspect as the Green River Killer. Ruined his name, ruined his reputation, he had his property searched, stuff taken from him, the whole works. And apparently he became a suspect because he came to the police wanting to help them to catch the Green River Killer, and part of their psychological profile of the Green River Killer was that they thought he would be interested in police work, so Melvin immediately became a suspect. So I mean, imagine, you're just trying to be helpful, and the next thing you know, you're hooked up to a machine with cops grilling you about you being the worst serial killer in history. Yeah, it's no wonder he failed it. But you might be asking, how come he failed it when Gary Ridgway passed with no problem? Well, that's because Gary Ridgway is a psychopath. And psychopaths don't have empathy. That's kind of what makes them psychopaths. So they feel no remorse for their crimes. They're also usually compulsive liars, which means they don't even often know the difference between the truth and a lie anymore. So ironically, the more psychotic you are, the more likely you are to pass a lie detector test. Therefore, the best way to beat a polygraph test is to be a psychopath. The end. But let's just say you dadgum aren't a psychopath and you still need to beat a lie detector test. What do? Well, it helps to know the techniques that interrogators use with lie detector tests. So let's just kind of go through that real quick. First, they ask what are called baseline questions. These are questions that you easily know the answer to. Often they know the answer to. Things like, what's your birthday? Where were you born? What kind of car you drive? This sets a baseline truth response that they can measure everything else against. Then they ask questions that you might be more likely to lie about, but are irrelevant to what they're there to question you about. Things like, have you ever watched porn? Do you take drugs? Have you ever committed a crime? Do you watch the Kardashians? You know, really embarrassing stuff. And this gives them an idea of your baseline lie response. And then they hit you with the relevant questions. These are the things that they really want to find out about. And then they monitor those and measure them against the baseline lie and truth responses. And it's only really considered a lie if it goes above the baseline lie response. So with all that in mind, the name of the game here is to throw off the baseline responses so that they've got an inaccurate thing to measure your actual lies against. One way to do that is through just pain, just sheer body pain. People have been known to put tacks in their shoes and kind of like push their toes against them to get that sharp pain response and throw things out of whack in those baseline responses. A lot of interrogators became hip to that, so now you usually have to take your shoes off whenever you do a lie detector test. But you could also bite your tongue or the inside of your mouth. In lieu of torturing yourself, another tactic might be to try to think of a really difficult math problem in your head, something that you might have to stress a little bit to figure out, something hard like 6 times 12. Shut up, I never math good. Of course, the cherry on top is to control your reactions when you're actually doing the relevant questions, lying for the relevant questions as much as possible. This means things like controlling your breathing, thinking of something calming, trying to calm your system and your body down as much as possible. And some people actually say that the simple fact that you're kind of hacking this lie detector test can actually be a calming effect on your body because you feel like you're more in control. Now, polygraphs aren't admissible in court, so it's not likely that you would need to lie to get out of a murder situation or something like that. Police don't really use it in that way anymore. I'll get back to that in a second, but it is used often as a recruitment tool for organizations like the FBI and the NSA. And this is actually a pretty controversial practice, according to George Matschke, who runs a site called antipolygraph.org. A lot of times these organizations will use that polygraph test to basically collect information about these potential employees that they can later use to blackmail them into doing unethical police stuff. And there are also cases of people who were denied positions in these organizations because they failed a polygraph test for whatever reason. And it might be for all those reasons that we just discussed a minute ago, because of nervousness. I mean, we often get nervous in job interviews and that kind of thing. So it's kind of frowned upon. It's still being done, but it is very controversial. Now, just because polygraph results aren't admissible in court doesn't mean they're not still helpful to police. Because often just the threat of making someone take a polygraph test is enough to get them to confess to a crime. And those confessions, they are admissible in court. So really, perhaps the best way to beat a polygraph test is just don't take one. All right, hope you enjoyed that. I certainly thought that was interesting, so I thought you guys might like it too. Don't go committing crimes because of this, please. Disclaimer. If this is your first time watching my channel, thank you for joining. I'm glad to see your face. If you would like to check out more of the kind of stuff that I do, I can't talk. If you want to watch me stumble through more videos, a good place to start might be this one right here. Google thinks you'll like that one, or any of the other things that might pop up on my channel. If you do like them, I invite you to subscribe because I do videos just like this on sciencey kind of topics every Monday and every Thursday. Also, if you're looking for some cool new t-shirts, mugs, hats, hoodies, you name it, there's all kinds of cool designs by a guy who lives in Prague, and he's been awesome to work with. He has some really cool nerdy stuff that you can find over at answerswithjoe.com/shirts. All right, I'll leave you with that for now. Thank you guys again for watching. You guys go out now, have an eye-opening rest of the week, and I'll see you on Monday. Love you guys. Take care.